Okay, brilliant, guys. So as we spoke about before, we're going to look now at the guidance itself and how we created that and what that means for the industry. So guidance has been developed in cooperation with industry partners such as UK Active, Public Health England and Sport England to ensure that the guidance is robust and fit for purpose for the industry as we move forward, potentially out of lockdown in the near future. The aim of the guidance is to support operators in reopening their swimming facilities following the period of closure due to COVID-19 and provides guidance on reducing the risk of COVID-19 transmissions within a swimming pool environment. It will highlight the continued requirements for safe social distancing and enhanced hygiene regimes, along with guidance on how this will impact on the operational management within swimming facilities. So there's practical guidance as well as overarching guidance, which we'll talk about a little bit more today as well. The guide will include details on getting pools back to operational requirements, certification, programming, understanding the needs of users coming out of isolation, especially those in our communities that are at most at risk and vulnerable, and then protecting and training the workforce, which is really key. And a lot of you guys on this call will fall under that as well. So you can access that guidance through our website, but we have done a link on the PowerPoint, again, which you will have access to at a later date as well. Okay, so what does our guidance consist of? So it is to service the whole industry, and therefore it's got 5 key sections to support different areas. So those are guidance around operators, which includes facilities and the venues, users, the people that are going to be using the potential pool, whether that be in a swimming session or whatever the case may be, swimming lessons, which is going to be our area of focus today, community swimming, and then finally club activity and the impacts that club swimming, whether that be synchronized swimming, diving or competitive swimming, has on your reopening your facility. Now, provided within each section are further details on how to implement the guiding principles for each audience. This includes practical ideas and additional considerations for the implementation of the guidance, along with links to supporting resources and examples of best practice. So we know the guidance, understanding people, the guidance is important to understand and then relate it to your setting. So we've designed it in a way where there's examples, best practice, and then principles that you can relate to your setting that fits and works for your environment, whether you be from a club background, operators, or swimming lessons. Okay, so here are some of the guiding principles for swimming lessons. So we've pulled out the key principles, and in particular, there's 2 that relates to teaching on poolside. So providers should have a dedicated officer responsible for COVID-19 considerations. So someone who is at the forefront and can take lead on anything that happens within swimming lessons. Teachers should deliver from poolside and adhere to government guidance on social distancing. Only 1 parent or carer per child should be allowed to supervise their child during swimming lessons. Providers should review available pool space to allow for correct social distancing, including entry and exit points. So that's really key. And when we're talking there, we mean in the pool as well. So how the learner's getting in and how they're going to get out. That's the start and before their lessons. You should allow sufficient time between lessons for cleaning and to reduce the chance of clustering and gatherings of groups on poolside. And where possible, teachers should remain in the same teaching station for the duration of their shift and aim to use the same equipment throughout. So the 2 that are highlighted that you can see on screen, they're 2 that we're specifically going to talk about today. So teachers should deliver on poolside and adhere to government guidance on social distancing. And where possible, teachers should remain in the same teaching station for the duration of their shift and aim to use the same set of equipment throughout their shift. The first thing to start off with then, before we talk about some adaptations and some guidance, is why are we teaching from poolside? Why have we suggested it? And what is the reasoning behind our choice there? So I think initially is to adhere to social distancing rules. Very simply, by being on poolside, it is easier for you to ensure social distancing between you and the swimmer, and also between other people that might be in the water and other activities that might be happening. So it's important to stay on the poolside for that reason. So that's our main reason for doing that. However, Does that mean that you cannot enter the water? No, it doesn't. So teachers and assistants can enter the water, but should still adhere to social distancing rules. So in the scenario where you cannot physically deliver from poolside, and we have spoke to a few partners that have got those exact scenarios, if you appropriately risk assess it, then you can do so, but social distancing still needs to be adhered to. That's really important, and that's the message that we're trying to reinforce. Manual support from someone outside of swimming household should only be given in the case of an emergency. So it might require you to have manual contact or physical contact, but it should be done so in an emergency. You know, the risk of COVID-19 isn't necessarily doesn't diminish the risk of drowning, and therefore if there's an emergency situation, you still have to act upon that, as will lifeguards do. But we're going to do every single step we can, so that's only in an emergency and not happening throughout the lesson. And then from a best practice point of view, and something we recommend to all of our level 1 and level 2 courses, is teaching or coaching, whichever setting you come from poolside, provides the best position to oversee the group in terms of safety and communication. So not only does it reinforce social distancing, it also gives you an opportunity to effectively observe and deliver from poolside for the class that are in the water. Okay, so a couple of benefits then from teaching on poolside. So what are the benefits to you as a teacher and the children in the water, or the swimmers in the water? So the safety of the group, it allows for a better view of the whole space, so you can observe and give feedback. It helps with communication, including both verbal and non-verbal, and we have got a dedicated workshop coming up about effective communication and how that's beneficial on poolside. It allows you to do clear demonstrations that can be absorbed, and then the learners can then act upon those and see clearly. You've got an improved viewpoint to observe and correct technique, therefore allows you to give more feedback. It allows you how to have better behaviour management of the class, which is not something you can always control, but it certainly allows you to have that better view and therefore that better behaviour management. It helps create a positive learning environment. You can provide appropriate feedback for each participant in the group. Again, going back to that, having a clearer view, especially if your class sizes are a little bit bigger. And then finally, and our headline kind of guidance, thinking of that post-COVID environment, getting back into the pool, is it's easier to adhere to social distancing. Now, we know, we acknowledge, and it's recognised that in some circumstances, the pool operator or the teacher / coach, depending on who's delivering, will have assessed the risk and may feel it's more appropriate to teach within the water. So we're not banning people from teaching in the water. It might be necessary, but what steps can you do before you need to teach in the water? Because social distancing is arguably going to be harder within the water. So what other steps have you got that you can do, which we're going to talk about today, to avoid you having to get in the water? When that scenario occurs and the teacher or the coach is in the water, it's strongly advised that the lifeguard is also present at all times. If teaching in the water without additional qualified lifeguard cover is being considered, a risk assessment should be conducted. So if you've not got lifeguard cover on poolside and you're in the water and that's your responsibility, then we strongly recommend that you have that lifeguard cover and you risk assess that. Because how does that look in terms of rescue and how does that fit for you? Lauren's going to take you through a little bit with the RLSS in a minute and some more tips there. We'll consider that risk assessment and what that looks like in your setting. And then finally, at all times, the teacher and coach must be able to clearly see all participants close enough to provide appropriate methods of manual support should this be required. So think about where you're positioning yourself and how you can be seen when you're in the water participating with the participants. Okay, so a couple of questions that we think might help with what we thought we'd go through, just to kind of reiterate some of what the guidance is or isn't saying. So can you teach from in the water? Yes, you can. However, our best practice and our advice is to teach from poolside. But if you do teach in the water, do so with a suitable risk assessment. What we shouldn't be doing is having manual support with swimmers that are outside your household or bubble or whatever the guidance might be updated to in the coming months, unless it's in an emergency. In an emergency, you may have to, but that's because they might be at risk of something else. But apart from that, we shouldn't be having physical contact. You can invite a parent into the water to support lessons. So yes, that might be preschool, and that might be how your lessons look already. Or it might be some of the lower stages of stages 1 to 7, so stages 1 and 2, for example. That might look very different from what you're doing pre-lockdown, but that might be a step you can do to help your learners. You can encourage parents and learners to put their own equipment on. So that might be in some of your messaging, that might be in some of your communications with parents, but you can encourage learners and parents to get their own equipment on, whether that be a backflow or arm discs or whatever equipment you might use that eliminates you from having to have that physical contact. So we would therefore recommend that you don't put that equipment on them. Again, that doesn't apply if it's not an emergency situation. You may have to then. But apart from that, we would recommend that you go through the parents, you go through the carer, and depending on the age of the child themselves, to use any of the equipment that they need.
Okay, so Lauren, if you just want to talk about the lifeguarding and the support from the RLSS.
Absolutely, thank you, Katie. So as we just touched on, you do need to make sure that all your risk assessments are up to date to return to the pool. We work in partnership with the Royal Lifesaving Society, and they have put together their guidance, which you can see the link on the screen here. We will make sure we get that link to you as well, and make sure that you are using the correct training and application suitable for your lessons. They have got a host of webinars as well. Again, that's the top link you can see here. So make sure you head over, marry up our guidance along with their guidance, and that you are completely covered if you are still teaching from in the water, if you see that as the most necessary approach for lessons post-COVID.
Okay, we're just going to have a look at risk assessing now. Again, if some of you are very, very used to having lifeguards on poolside and you're used to being in the water or using an assistant in the water, you might need to do a quick risk assessment of your lessons. And these are the types of things that we suggest that you consider when planning your lessons. Okay, so a lot of us as teachers are very, very used to turning up on poolside. You've got a mini lesson plan in your head, you've got some games and activities that you're very used to delivering, and you don't really consider the risks anymore because you're so comfortable in the environment that you're in. Going back, we're going to need to start thinking a little bit outside the box, and we're going to have to start risk assessing more so than we've probably done in the past. So when you risk assess, you need to think about the depth, the shape, any blind spots of the pool that you're teaching in, and your entry and exit points. So when we're risk assessing, we're thinking about in a COVID-19 environment, okay? So actually, what does this mean? If I'm from the pool side, what do I need to take into consideration? So the type of pool. Then we need to think about the ability of the swimmers, so non-swimmers, participants that might need additional support. Then we need to think about the activities or practices that we normally do. So I see some great kind of fetch games where we're putting lots of equipment in the pool, or ring of roses where children are holding hands. Actually, how do we make this suitable for a COVID environment? What adaptations do we need to make? The equipment that we've got available, and then the staff that you've got to help you. So any assistant teachers, helpers, or lifeguards. So the risk assessment should take into account the ability to see the whole group, including the pool floor and obviously any blind spots, your access to alarms, controls, poolside spectator areas, and in case of an emergency, and lone working if appropriate. So if any of you are out there on your own and you're teaching, your risk assessment might need to be a little bit larger. Further considerations to take into account, again, the pool depth, the ability, age of participants, and the use of flotation equipment. So we're going to have a look at a bit of the flotation equipment later on. But these are the things that I would like you guys to think, actually, if I do my normal lesson, I know front crawl is the main theme and my contrasting activity is sculling. Actually, how am I going to maintain social distancing and delivering those activities?